Welcome back in, everybody. It is so good to see you. We are 10 games deep into the 21 regular season for the Kansas City Chiefs. We're looking at the defense today. I hope you're doing well. I appreciate you jumping back on board with us again. We're using my new device again. I appreciate the feedback, and I hope the good audio and the good video continues. I apologize for the lights you're seeing right here. I usually broadcast during the day, and the daylight comes pouring in and kind of dulls that a little bit. Tonight I'm broadcasting at night, and so the lights are shining a little bit. I apologize for that. I have charts and graphs and notes all over the place. It's going to be a fun video today. Let me show you quickly what I've got set up. These right here, this list at the top, those gold letters, those are the 10 teams that Kansas City has played so far this season. This first line graph that you're seeing, I'll explain it more in a second, but this is the total yards per game given up by the Chiefs so far this year. This line graph right here, this green one, that's points per game given up by the Kansas City Chiefs during their 10 games this year. And eventually I'll get to these two little miniature charts, which is passing yards per game allowed and rushing yards allowed. And then we'll get over into the news and notes about some of the adjustments and stuff. All right, I can't wait. Let's start with this right here. Total yards per game. We all know how horrible the Chiefs defense looked during the first month of the season. And yet, over the past 5 games, they've shown a decided, consistent improvement. And you can see it here when you look at total yards, first of all. I've got it starting at 500, going all the way down to 300. Week 1 against Cleveland, 457 yards total given up. Week 2 against Baltimore, they gave up a season high 481 yards total. They dipped down against San Diego, a little bit better in the yardage category, 352 yards given up against the Chargers. But back again against Philadelphia, 461 total yards, even though they won that game. And then, of course, the abysmal Buffalo game, which we really don't want to remember at all, 436 yards. Now, during those first 5 games, those first 5 weeks that the Chiefs defense was playing, they're giving up like an average of about 440 yards total per game, 440, 450, something like that. Just abysmal. But ever since then, and you get right here to these 5 games where they're playing Washington, Tennessee, the Giants, Green Bay, and Las Vegas, you can see a massive drop-off here. 276 against Washington, total yards allowed. 369 against Tennessee, even though they lost that game in a blowout. 300 against the Giants, 301 against Green Bay, 299 against Las Vegas. You can see the consistency here, especially the past 3 weeks. But the point is, when you're looking at total yards allowed by the Chiefs, first 5 games, which is abysmal, 440, 450, versus the last 5 games, which is basically somewhere just north of 300 yards a game, massive drop-off. And you guys probably already know this because you follow the team closely, but when you look at other teams around the league, these in-season changes, these in-season trends are kind of hard to catch. You kind of get an impression of a team maybe during the first month of the season that might not hold true if that team changes course during the middle part of the season. And that's exactly what's happening to the Chiefs here. Total yards just getting brutalized here in those first 5 games. It has changed drastically, massive fall off here. Same thing in points per game allowed by the Kansas City Chiefs. First 5 weeks, you give up 29 to Cleveland, 35 to Baltimore, 30 to San Diego, 30 to Philadelphia, 38 to Buffalo. Pretty free-flowing river of points allowed by the Chiefs, somewhere right around 32, 33 points a game during those first 5 weeks. But it's changed. Over the past 5 games that they've played, they've given up 13 to Washington, 27 to Tennessee, which isn't great, but it's less than what they were during the first part of the season, 17 to the Giants, 7 to the Packers, and 14 to Las Vegas. So not just in yards allowed, but in points per game, the Chiefs' defense has improved dramatically here, and we'll talk about why in a second, but I just want to look at these figures first. You can see the same thing. Red line, massive drop-off. Green line, massive drop-off. And it's just undeniable what's happening here to the Chiefs' defense over the past 5 games versus the first 5 games. Now, passing yards per game allowed. Same thing holds true. During the first 5 weeks of the season, they were giving up 296 yards passing per game to Cleveland, Baltimore, San Diego, Philadelphia, and Buffalo. They were getting roasted. There were wide receivers open all over that Chiefs secondary, and they were giving up a ton of yardage. But during the last 5 games, only 221 yards per game allowed in passing yards against these 5 teams right here. So once again, Chiefs defense has improved against the pass and improved dramatically. Now, here's what's the even more interesting part, and I don't know, some of you guys may know this, some of you may not. I didn't realize it was this drastic until I sat down and did the work. Rushing yards per game allowed. Now, I don't have it first 5 games versus last 5. I've got it first 2 games of the season versus the last 8 games. So this is a long trend in rushing yards now that we're seeing. The first 2 weeks of the season, you guys remember, playing against the Browns, playing against the Ravens. The Browns had an awesome day rushing, and the Ravens basically ran the ball whenever and wherever they wanted to the entire night against that Kansas City defense. It was an awful performance by the Chiefs against the run, against the Ravens. 202 rushing yards allowed against those first 2 teams per game. 202 yards average between those first 2 teams. Over the last 8 games, however, and I know this is a lot of numbers, but it's worth going through. Over the last 8 games, ever since those Cleveland-Baltimore games, the last 8 games now, the Chiefs are only giving up 93 yards against the run per game, under 100, and they've played running backs Derrick Henry of Tennessee, and they've played running back Josh Jacobs of Las Vegas, and they've played a couple of other rushing attacks that were pretty decent as well, and they have shut down the running game. I mean, they have committed to it, and they have performed, and they have communicated. Over the last 8 games, Kansas City has given up 93 yards rushing per game, and it has been outstanding. So just absolutely outstanding job by the Chiefs defense to improve in all areas, but particularly in stopping the run. That's where they've shown the biggest changeover, and that's been consistent now for 8 games. So I don't expect that to change too much. That's not to say they can't have a bad night against a certain running back, but in general, the Chiefs' run defense looks like it's here to stay for the season. And what that means for other teams is, as they're game planning, they can't necessarily count on having a big game from their running back, or even having a consistent game from their running back. They've got to recognize that the Chiefs' defense is going to make it difficult to run against, and that hinders the offensive game plan for a lot of the teams that the Chiefs are going to be playing for the rest of the season, okay? So that's what the numbers say. Now, why is the Chiefs' defense better over the past 5 weeks? And I think there's 3 different reasons, 3 different categories, if you will. First of all, they're just healthy. Matter of fact, the Chiefs are actually remarkably healthy for an NFL team at this time of year. Chris Jones is back. Charvarius Ward is back. Rashad Fenton is back. Willie Gay is back. I think there's somebody else in the defense. If you know who it is, toss it in. Those are at least 4 guys who get major playing time or are starters that the Chiefs didn't have during this first month of the season that they now have had for the past five games of the season. So just being healthy is a huge difference. You know, they have the defense that they planned on having. And you know, you expect 1 injury or 2, but they basically had 4 or 5 injuries right there at the start of the season to the defense, and that hurts. That shows up. It shows up right here in these total yards and in the points per game. So it's just nice to have everybody healthy, right? And you expect an injury or 2, but you hope to not have 4 or 5 starters out like the Chiefs did for that first month of the season. They're back to healthy now. They've got these guys back. That's a huge difference. The second difference is the schedule backed off a lot, okay? I really doubt that the Chiefs' defense, even healthy, is really as bad as they looked against those first 5 teams, okay? You're talking about the Browns, who at the time were having a good season. They're not having a good season now, but they were in the first month. Baltimore, who looked outstanding during the first month of the season, not quite as good now, but they had looked great. San Diego was on fire during the first month of the season, and Buffalo was on fire for the first couple of months of the season as well. So you basically hit most, not all, but most of the AFC contenders during that first month of the season. all with good offenses, most of them with good pass rushing ability. You hit all those guys in the first month of the season, and that's going to show up too. So the schedule backed off a lot. You've got the Washington football team with Taylor Heineke. You got the Tennessee football team, who's outstanding, but then you got the Giants with Daniel Jones, and you got the Packers with Jordan Love, and you've got Las Vegas, who's playing without Henry Ruggs, but Las Vegas still had lots of weapons. They still had a good running back. They still had Hunter Renfrow. They still had other guys to throw the football to, and you did a good job against them too. So even though the Raiders didn't have Henry Ruggs, they still have plenty of weapons on offense to move the football, and they really struggled to do that. Against Kansas City on 299 yards. So they're healthy, and the schedule has backed off a good bit. So I kind of doubt that the Chiefs are anywhere near as bad as what we saw the first month of the season. There's just no way. Are they as good as what we're seeing the past 5 weeks on defense? Maybe not. We'll find out Sunday against Dallas. I think it's Sunday against Dallas. That'll be a great test with the Cowboys offense. But they're looking really good. Okay, they're looking outstanding. And being healthy is part of it, and the schedule backing off a little bit is part of it as well. Now, here's a bunch of the adjustments, okay? Here's a ton of things that the Chiefs have done and are continuing to do. Some of this is over the past 3 weeks especially, that has made the Chiefs' defense better and consistently better, and I don't think they're going to back off of this. One thing is we're seeing Chris Jones more at defensive tackle. I love the idea of moving Chris Jones out to defensive end some, but the Chiefs' defense is just better with Chris Jones at defensive tackle. It operates better for a multitude of reasons I'm not going to go into tonight, but we're seeing Chris Jones play more defensive tackle. I will say this, I heard a quote by Chris Jones. He did say he liked playing defensive end because you don't get as much wear and tear as you do at defensive tackle. So that's a good reason to push him out at defensive end for, say, 10 or 15 snaps a game. I'm totally in favor of that, but the defense operates better with Chris Jones at defensive tackle, and we've seen that more over the past 3 weeks. Part of that is because Melvin Ingram is playing defensive end, but not entirely. We'll get to Melvin Ingram in a minute, but Ingram's only played 46% of the snaps in one of the games and 39% of the snaps in the other game. Melvin Ingram isn't the only reason that Chris Jones is allowed to go back to defensive tackle, okay? The Chiefs' defense just works better with him at defensive tackle. So we've seen that not just for the past 3 weeks, we've seen that for the past 3 to 5 weeks, him starting to push back the defensive tackle. But the Chiefs' defense works better that way. Number 2, Sorensen and Niemann. We're seeing them mainly, not exclusively, but we're seeing Ben Niemann at linebacker and Daniel Sorensen at linebacker / safety / whatever. We're seeing them mainly come in on third downs. And I don't know for sure, but I assume that's because Sorensen and Niemann are veterans and they're less likely to make big mistakes on third down. So we're seeing them, instead of getting the heavy lifting playing time that they were getting earlier in the season, we're seeing them go back to a spot where they can contribute, and there's not quite so much pressure being placed on their athleticism and on their ability to be fast, okay, which they don't have. But third downs is a good time, especially 3rd and 5, 3rd and 8. It's a good time to put these two guys in because even though they may lack a little bit in speed and athleticism, they're experienced and they're less likely to make mistakes on those third down plays. L'Jarius Sneed has looked fantastic. I cannot say it enough. He has looked fantastic in run support over the past 3 weeks. Now, if he looked good in run support earlier in the season, I just didn't notice it. If he looked good against the run last year, again, I just didn't notice it. I haven't done extensive video work on Sneed, but I have noticed it the past 3 weeks. He has been outstanding, and not just in run support, but when they're running screens out to running backs in the flats, or they're throwing the flats, to a wide receiver. Sneed has been outstanding in not only getting over there to contest the play, but in actually making the tackle. He is sticking it, and he looks like a safety when he does it, which, by the way, we've alluded to that in earlier videos. He played safety at Louisiana Tech, I think, for 2 seasons. He has done outstanding, and some of these running backs are bigger than Sneed, and he has still made the tackles. Some of these plays have been on third downs where the Chiefs needed a stop, and L'Jarius Sneed has given it to them because the offenses are trying to challenge the Chiefs out in the flats, and Sneed has really stepped up the past 3 weeks. Now again, I haven't done extensive video work. Maybe he was already doing some of this before, but I didn't notice it. The past 3 weeks against New York and Green Bay and Las Vegas, I have seen it consistently more than once. I probably 7 or 8, 9 times now I've seen Sneed make these stops out on the edges, and it wasn't a gang tackle, it was just him. It's the kind of play out there in the flat where if he doesn't make the tackle, the running back or the wide receiver out there in the flat goes for probably another 8 to 10 yards, and it's a big gain for the offense. But Sneed has stopped them stone cold. Outstanding play in run support and screen support out there in the flats by L'Jarius Sneed over the past 3 weeks. Just exceptional. Just absolutely exceptional. I'm going to run out of adjectives here, but Sneed has done an outstanding job out there in the flats. The defensive backs have become more physical, and I don't know, I haven't sat down and looked at how much zone versus man they're playing over the past 5 weeks, and some of those zones are half zones, half man, and sometimes, you know, after 2 seconds, most zones become man defense anyway. So I'm not necessarily going to say that the Chiefs are playing more man or anything like that, but what I have noticed is the defensive backs are a lot closer to all the receivers in the first place, and they're playing more physical. They're giving up the occasional pass interference call. They're giving up the occasional holding call, but I can live with that. If they're playing physical and they're playing tight and they're communicating good, they look like they're communicating better over the past 3 or 4 weeks, and they're playing more physical, the defensive backs just look better. And they also, quite honestly, they look happier. Sneed looks happier. Tyrann Mathieu looks happier. All the defensive backs look happier because it appears that they are being asked to and allowed to play more aggressively instead of kind of playing these soft, looser zones. It looks like they're playing tighter, more physical coverage, and they're doing a good, solid job of that. Okay. Now again, they haven't been playing the high-octane offenses like they're going to play against Dallas, and like they played during the first month of the season. But even against Tennessee, when they got kind of blown out and the game just kind of got away from them there in the first half, I mentioned this, there were not a lot of receivers flying loose all over that Chiefs defense. They were tightly covered, the throws were contested, and the Chiefs are just doing a lot better job of that. Now, I don't know if that's coaching. I don't know if that's a scheme decision. I don't know if the Chiefs secondary has just taken it on themselves to try harder, play better. That I don't know, but I have noticed they're playing tighter and more physical. They're not giving up plays all over the field. Most of the plays that they are giving up, most of them are contested plays, tight coverage thrown into tight spots. Again, they're not shutting down other teams' wide receivers, but they're contesting everything, and they look more physical, and they look a lot happier doing it. Now, that doesn't necessarily include Charvarius Ward. He at times looks like he's maybe, I don't know, not 100%. I'm not at all sure that Charvarius Ward, and I haven't checked the injury reports, if he's 100%. He looks like maybe he's not quite the Ward that we're used to. But in general, the Chiefs secondary looks a lot more physical, a lot happier about getting to be more physical, and they're playing a lot tighter, and they're contesting things a lot more. And that's going to cut down always. Yeah, you're going to give up some big plays, but that's going to cut down on the amount of completed passes, and it's going to cut down on the yards after catch. So outstanding here by the defensive backs. Willie Gay looks really good against the pass. Not just because he's got 2 interceptions, but the way he's dropping back into coverage. I'm going to talk about Willie Gay for a second here. Love Willie Gay. Willie Gay is really smooth in pass coverage. I mean, he's all over the place. He looks very smooth. He's guarding the right people. He's in the right place. And you know, again, he's not perfect, but he's doing an outstanding job in pass coverage. And he's also, and this is what I like too, they're using Willie Gay to threaten blitz a lot. Even if he doesn't come on the blitz, they're using Willie Gay because he's very athletic, he's very fast. They're using him to come up and threaten blitzes. And even if they drop him back out into coverage, just having that guy there to kind of give the quarterback something else to think about Willie Gay is doing an excellent job of that. So even when he's threatening a blitz and when he drops back into coverage, he's athletic enough to pull that off. And I love what they're doing with Willie Gay there. So he looks outstanding in pass coverage. That's something they didn't have the first month of the season. They've got it now. And that contributes. That's one of those things that starts to take something that was against you and starts to move the needle back in your favor. On the flip side, Willie Gay in run coverage does not look as good as he looked last year. Last year, Willie Gay in run coverage looked very patient. He looked like he always knew where he was supposed to be. He was always in the right hole. This year, and I don't know if this is a player tendency thing or if this is the way he's being coached, this year it looks like he's overrunning some of these running plays. It looks like he's trying to chase too hard and get out in front of the running back, and the running back is cutting back and jumping in behind him on some of these plays. So he doesn't look as good in run coverage as he looked last year. Not horrible, he's still making a lot of good plays, but he doesn't look quite as crisp. I expect we'll see him do better at that as the season rolls along. But he looks outstanding in pass coverage and in threatening the blitz and disguising the blitz and dropping back out into coverage. Outstanding there. One quick note on Willie Gay, and this is one reason I love him. Watching Scottie Pippen play basketball in the 1990s, Scottie Pippen was so fluid, and I know some of you, I'm going old school here, okay? So go back and watch the videos of Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen almost looked so smooth that he wasn't even trying at times, and he was. But he was just so fluid, moving up and down the basketball court and playing. It kind of looked at times like Scottie Pippen wasn't even trying. But he was. He was just such a good athlete and so smooth and so fluid. Willie Gay looks the same way. He's such a good athlete. He's kind of got that slide step where he almost glides from one place to the other. That's against the run. That's back in pass coverage. He's very smooth, very athletic. You can see it every time he moves. And if you want a contrast in style, Michael Jordan, for instance, in the 90s looked like he was using every single muscle of his body on every single second of every single play of every single game. You could tell that Michael Jordan was maxed out all the time. But Scottie Pippen, just a different looking athlete. Willie Gay is the same way. Very smooth, very athletic. He's given his best, but he just looks so silky smooth, gliding from one place to the other. That's the athleticism that you're seeing from Willie Gay, and I expect him to improve against the pass even more, and I expect him to improve against the run. Being out for the first month of the season, I still don't think we're seeing the best out of Willie Gay by a long shot. Melvin Ingram, okay, I wrote fast and exciting here. That's what he looks like so far. He looks fast. He hasn't made a lot of huge plays yet. They're still working him into the system and kind of figuring out exactly when they want to bring him in. Like I said, so far the first game he played 46% of the defensive snaps, and then the second game 39% of the defensive snaps. I expect we'll see him play more. But he looks fast, he looks exciting, he looks smart, and it looks like he brings some attitude, which, by the way, that's the Melvin Ingram that we've seen for years, right? And you always wonder when a guy comes into a different system if you're going to see that same thing. Now, he hasn't made a lot of hugely impactful plays in 2 games, but I expect him to. Melvin Ingram looks like that he's really going to be a significant contribution to this Chiefs defense. Now, I want to head this off. I think I said this earlier in the broadcast. I've already heard some announcers start to talk about how the Chiefs defense looks better with Melvin Ingram in it, and it does. But the Chiefs defense, I want to make this point very plain. The Chiefs defense was already improving by a lot a long time before Melvin Ingram ever got here. Against the run, all the way back to week 3, and against the pass and just in total points per game allowed the past 5 weeks. So the Chiefs defense was already getting better. Melvin Ingram, I think, is going to add to that. So as they start to work their way through the second half of the season, starting to work their way maybe into the playoffs, we hope, and through the playoffs, Melvin Ingram could be a huge difference, okay? And I know Chiefs fans have kind of been begging for edge rushers for a couple of seasons now. Melvin Ingram is the kind of guy who can contribute to that for the rest of the year. Really, really like what we're seeing out of Melvin Ingram on far. In spite of the fact that we haven't seen a whole lot of huge plays out of him yet, I really think that as they work him in, over the second half of the season. I really think that he's going to be huge for Kansas City. Continuing the blitz looks, this is something that the Chiefs weren't doing much of in the first month of the season. And I don't know why. I'm not going to criticize that, but they needed to do more of it, and they've done a lot more of it over the past few weeks. And this is so important, I think, for any defense. They're threatening pressure up. They're bringing, instead of 4 guys on the line, they're bringing 5, 6, and sometimes even 7 guys on the line of scrimmage before the ball is snapped. And in a lot of cases, everybody's backing out, okay? In a lot of cases, they're not bringing any more than 4 people anyway. But it's so important. It is so important. And I think this is true on any level of football. It is so important to threaten the blitz from different directions on almost every single play, because it gives the quarterback something else to think about. He's already thinking about the safeties. He's already thinking about the Mike linebacker. He's already thinking about the score. He's already thinking about the down and distance. He's already thinking about what matchup he might take advantage of. Quarterbacks have a lot on their mind on every play. But if you start to threaten blitz, even if you don't come on, 20% of those times, just threatening it and threatening it from different directions. Now all of a sudden, his blocking schemes get a lot more complicated. The stuff he has to call, his communication with the offensive line, his communication with the running back, all of that, now he's got a lot more to think about in a very short period of time. Those pre-snap reads, he's not going to get a lot of time to think about it. And once the ball is snapped, if he doesn't know where these guys are coming from, and if the offensive line especially doesn't know where these guys are coming from, that little half a second of hesitation is enough to make a difference on every single play. And the Chiefs have done that. Over the past 5 games, they look like they're bringing pressure on almost every single play. And they don't usually, except on third downs. They tend to bring that extra guy or 2. They're backing out of these blitzes a lot of times, but they're mixing it in enough to give those quarterbacks something to think about and to give those offensive linemen something to think about. And that's so important. They've continued to do that over the past 5 weeks. It's not that they didn't do it at all in the first month of the season, but they weren't doing it much. They were basically getting a vanilla look pre-snap on a lot of these games. And they're continuing those blitz looks, and that is so important, just to give the quarterback an extra something to think about and to give those offensive linemen something to think about, and a little bit more confusion as well. Last thing here I think I want to cover, Geron Reid. I've noticed this the past couple of weeks. I haven't seen it over the past 5 weeks, but over the last 2 weeks, I've seen Geron Reid finally start to get some push up the middle. And that push is getting right in the quarterback's face, and it's making them uncomfortable. And we especially saw it in the Raiders game, where he's getting into Carr's face, the quarterback, and getting pressure there, making him uncomfortable. He doesn't get room to throw. He doesn't get to step up. Carr doesn't like to move around a whole lot. He kind of likes to stay in the pocket. And we saw Geron Reid finally getting some push. Now, is that just because we're seeing Chris Jones move back to the middle? I don't know. Who's to say? Maybe Geron Reid is just getting more comfortable in the defense. But I think Geron Reid probably likes playing alongside Chris Jones in the middle. Kind of takes some pressure off of Geron Reid, and I think we're going to continue to see more push out of him as well, and that will be huge. This right here, out of all the things that the Chiefs could do this year, if Geron Reid can get more push up the middle, even if it means Chris Jones has to play beside him at defensive tackle, if Geron Reid can get more push up the middle, that might do more for the Chiefs defense than anything else we've talked about. The schedule break, the guys being healthy, the move of Chris Jones, the addition of Melvin Ingram, any of it. If Geron Reid can get push up the middle on these quarterbacks, get them off their spot, even against the mobile ones, if he can get that push, it limits their field of vision. It gives them something else to think about while they're trying to look downfield and snap the football. This could be huge. We'll keep an eye on it. Maybe that was just a good game or 2 that he had, but I would love to see Geron Reid start getting more push up the middle, and that would be huge for the Chiefs defense if that could happen. It might take them from being a top 25, top 20 kind of defense, push them up more to the top 15 defense. That's how big of a deal this could possibly be. in the future. All right, I think we've covered everything. We'll probably do an offensive video in a few days. If I get time, I'll do a Dallas Cowboys preview. We'll see. But thank you so much for watching. Have a good week. Enjoy the Cowboys game. We'll see you later. Bye.